Well, I guess we're starting a new episode. So
That's what
how
we're
was your
doing.
week, man?
My week has been pretty good. We're still in the middle of renovating.
Has
so-
it grown since the week previous?
Uh,
Or are you,
yeah, it
are you
has.
containing
it has.
it?
It has grown. It is now spread to the living room and the hallway and the stairs, and we've got a new closet system came in yesterday, and I had to have an argument with the delivery guy because he just wanted to basically dump everything off the truck. And it's a million little pieces. And I was like, don't you even have a manifest or something that we can like count these as they come off? And he's like, no, all I'm supposed to do is just drop them off and take a picture and leave. And I'm like, dude, this is like $6,000 worth of stuff. What are you, Amazon here? You're just like,
Just
take a
dropping it
picture
off.
at the garage and leave? I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. There gets to be a point where there should be a protocol, right?
Yeah. Are you responsible for putting that all together, or you got the guy coming out to do it?
No, we're responsible for it. They want to charge 20% of the price. I don't want to pay $1,200 for someone to put it together.
All right, man. Good luck.
No, we're gonna have the guys that are doing the renovation. We're gonna have the contractor put up the poles, I guess you call them, or whatever, the that hold the shelf supports, and then we'll put the drawers and everything, all that up where we want it. So
Okay. Well, good luck with your project, man. It sounds
Yeah.
like it's gonna get worse and worse before it gets better.
Now next week I probably will say you were right. Should have paid the $1,200 and had the guy do it. But I know where you stand on those things, and I'm still in that kind of in between place where I'm like, I'll do it myself.
Well, I always want to do things myself, but then I never find the time. I always got 1,800 other things I got to work on. So
Yeah, that's absolutely true as well. But somewhere in there has to be a little satisfaction. I should have brought pictures though of the cat project, right? So I've effectively destroyed the look of my gate in an attempt to keep the cat in. And if I had been thinking about it, I would have started filming this effort from the beginning,
Yeah.
and then it would have gone viral on YouTube, and I would have been a star, and I would have quit this podcast and retired to Florida.
yeah, just been an influencer for your cat project.
Oh yeah, because this has been an amazing journey. But I think I finally got his ass today. So I put up mesh, which he just promptly climbed over. So of course I should see that, right? He could have just walked through the gate before. So I put up mesh, and I thought, okay, maybe he won't climb up the mesh, but that was a stupid idea. So then I put up plastic pieces on there so he can't climb up that, right? So then he figured out, okay, I didn't put it all the way though on the gate, right? I put it kind of halfway up. So I figured if he jumps up or climbs up, he'll get to a point where he can't reach it. Well, he climbs up and then figures out that he can stretch just enough to get over it and get to the other piece. I also put a 4-inch pipe over on the top to make like a barrier, right? No problem. He climbs up to the point where he can't climb anymore, reaches up above it, gets a claw in, and there he is. He's over. Okay, so then I put plastic all the way to the bottom, going all the way down, right? But not over the whole gate, just the part where he's going over all the time, right? So the other part of the gate he's leaving alone. So then what does he do? He sits there and studies it for a minute, and then he just jumps straight, I was about to cuss. He jumps straight up from the ground over everything, right? And jumps over everything and lands in enough space where he can get his claws in and get over the top of everything I put up there and climb on up and get over the gate. Okay, so now I got his ass figured out though. I put a little overhang on there like this, and I set it up with some bungee cord. So now when he jumps up there, it goes down and he can't get a hold of it. Right, so I figured it out. I got him. Right,
Yeah.
But then I got tired and I didn't finish out the gate, so I only did half of the gate. So then he just walks over to the other part of the gate that he's never gone to before to climb over it. Figures out, oh, there's nothing there to stop him, so he just climbs up and over. So today, me and Chandler finished out the gate. Right, we get it all done. It stops him for exactly 1 second, because then he climbs up to where the latch is on the gate, because we had to leave a little cutout right there. And there's a little flappy part so we can reach through. So to the cat, it should look like there's nothing to hold on to, right? But he's figured out, well, if my hand can go through it and unlatch the gate, then his body should be able to go through the other way and get out. So he just looks at me for like a second and jumps up, grabs that part of it, climbs his way through, right? By the way, for those of you out there that are trying to get a cat to come to you, play kitten sounds. Apparently cats respond to kitten sounds. If a cat sounds like it's in distress, other cats come running. Okay? Do not play the ones that say cat in heat. Okay? You don't want that.
Okay.
You don't want them spraying everywhere. So anyway, so then I put a little, like one of those little flappy deals right there again, right? So it'll stop. Finally, I think I stopped him. We'll find out tonight though, because he's got his routine. He likes to go out, you know. And I stopped going to look for him because he goes out, he comes back, and does his thing. You know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, at what point do you just let him go?
Well, the thing
just
with,
let him do his thing.
The thing
Run
with
the
that
show.
is that number one, cats live much shorter lives if they're allowed to roam.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, they kill a lot of animals. You know, a lot of birds, a lot of other animals that they shouldn't be killing, but mostly birds. I don't know if my cat is a killer like that yet. But, you know, I know that cats are, in general, pretty heavy killers. So, and the third thing is that I actually made a deal with the Humane Society that it would not be an outdoor cat, meaning not be allowed to go out and roam. It can roam in my yard, but I'm not supposed to let it out, you know, into the public, into the wild.
Gotcha.
So technically I would be in violation of that contract. If the cat got picked up, I don't want to have to go to the Humane Society and explain myself.
Yeah, there you go.
But now my gate looks like shit, but hopefully the cat will stay in. And if I can commercialize it, I might become a millionaire off that.
Okay, there you go. There you go. We have a pack of stray cats that run around our little neighborhood. They're always in our backyard terrorizing the squirrels and birds. So, I'm Scott Hess, tax and business consultant.
I'm John Barton, small business owner. Remember the tortoise and the hare? Slow and steady wins the race.
We started Turtlesmith to help people start small businesses, providing information and resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Build a solid foundation and forge your dreams.
There you go. Okay, well, on to our main segment today. It is step 3 of phase 2. It's an exciting one for me. It's the accounting section. It's just something I actually know about. I'm excited to talk about. This is going to be a very basic overview of accounting. I don't want to get too crazy. I mean, you know, accounting is a 4-year degree, so it would be wild for me to sit here and say all the intricacies of accounting. But you should, in this step, be brushed up and up on the various aspects of accounting, just so you can be able to have an intelligent conversation about it with your tax preparer and accountant, so you kind of know what's going on. There'll be more information available on the website, and then we're hoping to do some really in-depth master classes in the future where we can really talk about how to use the various softwares and how to produce your financial statements. But there is a lot of available information on YouTube and classes that you can take if you wish to dig into this further. So we're going to talk about the basics of accounting. The first thing to talk about is cash basis versus accrual. And so as a small business, 99% of the time, I would say you're probably going to use what's called a cash basis system of accounting. That basically just means that whenever money enters your possession, you know, your bank account or in your hand, and whenever it leaves, that's when you're recording that transaction. So if you buy something, that day is when you expense it. If you receive revenue, that day is when you record it. And so that's cash basis. It just follows the money. Accrual basis is a little more complicated, but it is better in some circumstances. Accrual-based accounting is when you record the invoices as of the day that you receive them, not necessarily when you pay them out. Same thing for revenue. When you invoice a customer, that's when you're recording the revenue, not necessarily when you receive the money. So those things have two other accounts, you know, accounts payable and accounts receivable that you kind of have to track. So I don't suggest as a small business owner that you really use accrual unless you have a tax accountant or a bookkeeper or somebody like that helping you along the way.
So just from a layperson's perspective on this, if I'm and correct me if I'm not understanding this correctly. Mm-hmm. So if I were to book invoices, so I invoice someone, I book that then as basically as income when I send an invoice out.
Yeah.
But the invoice hasn't been paid.
Right.
Similar to booking an invoice that I owe, but it hasn't been paid,
Yep.
right? So at the end of the year, when there's outstanding invoices or outstanding, whether I'm supposed to be paid or whether I'm supposed to pay them, how does that work out for knowing where you stand? I mean,
If you're in accrual accounting, you just record all those. Those are recorded on your profit and loss. Those are recorded on your taxes. Those outstanding receivables are considered revenue in the accrual accounting. But on a cash basis accounting, which is what I'm recommending that all small business owners use, I use a bit cash basis for all of your businesses. Whenever we receive money, when it's deposited to the bank account or when it's accepted into your possession, that is when we record it as income, not when you invoice or when you're due money.
Okay, so basically what we're saying to you is just use cash basis.
It's the most common and typical for small businesses. Now, accrual accounting does have some advantages, but like I said, you do need a bookkeeper or somebody paying attention to it all the time, and it'll become a real headache as a small business owner if you're trying to run your business and do accrual accounting.
Now, bookkeeping in general is just a pain in the butt for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we really don't like it to do it.
Which is why companies like mine exist. So.
Well, exactly. But I went through 2 other accountants,
Mm-hmm.
before I got to you, and neither of those accountants offered bookkeeping.
Yeah.
They offered me like phone numbers of people who would do bookkeeping. But even those people wanted us to pretty much do the bookkeeping before it got to them to do the bookkeeping.
Yeah. There's not a lot of services that do the full service bookkeeping as you're kind of going along. Most of them will just review your transactions, which is something that small businesses should look into. Your accountants can also do it. I offer that service here where I just review people's books as well.
Now, I think it's become a little bit easier these days because a lot of transactions are done electronically. You can review it through the bank accounts and other cards and stuff like that.
That is true.
And then I guess the one that's outstanding is whatever happens in cash, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the hardest one to deal with.
Yeah, it can be. So.
But yeah, I have been very satisfied with how you've been handling everything, and
well, I appreciate that. So in bookkeeping, in today's what's called the GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, we use double entry bookkeeping. And so this can be a little bit complicated to wrap your head around. So we'll have more information on the website, but try to follow along a little bit if you can. So whenever a transaction occurs, whenever you buy something, whenever you receive money for revenue, it affects at least 2 accounts on your chart of accounts. So when you set up your accounting, you have a whole chart of accounts, which has a list of bank accounts and assets, and then all the expenses and potential revenue. Double entry bookkeeping affects at least 2 of those with every transaction. So, for example, when you receive money, your cash balance increases and your revenue increases. So those 2 different accounts both are affected by the receiving of cash. When you pay out an expense, your cash goes down and your expense amount goes up. And so 2 accounts there are also affected. And we use a system called credits and debits. So you credit one account, debit another account, and they equal out. And that is the basis of double entry bookkeeping. It gets a lot more complicated when you have things that might affect multiple accounts, but that's the basics of double entry bookkeeping. Every time you do a transaction, it affects more than one account.
So don't do what I did, though. I did quadruple entry bookkeeping, which was somehow when I tried to use QuickBooks myself, I somehow doubled everything and thought I was making a lot more money than I was, which obviously I was not, and which I believe you had to untangle a lot of.
A little bit. We untangled some, but it worked out fine. Right. So, it's important to understand kind of the basics of double entry bookkeeping and how the credits and debits works. Again, we'll have a lot more information online, and there's some tutorials out there where you can learn a little bit better from actual teachers who can teach this a little better. But the whole point of using the double entry bookkeeping, whether you're using the cash basis or accrual, is to develop the financial statements. So the financial statements are the entire point of bookkeeping. You want to have accurate financial statements for your business. And there are 4 financial statements. There is the balance sheet, profit and loss, statement of cash flows, and then the statement of retained earnings. The first one, the balance sheet, it basically just gives a snapshot of your company at any point in time. So it has your assets, your liabilities, and your equity on there. And that gives you, just at any given day or any point in time, it gives you a snapshot of basically what your company's worth. So the assets should equal liabilities and equity. That's the balance sheet formula. But your assets are things like cash, fixed assets, inventory, accounts receivable, things of that nature. Your liabilities are what you owe. So accounts payable, credit card balances, your taxes that you might owe, sales tax or payroll taxes. And then the equity portion is considered the value of the company basically after liquidation. So if you took your assets and liquidated them all, paid off all of your liabilities, you'd be left over with what your equity is.
So where this information is important is like understanding that just because you have a balance in the bank doesn't mean that you should spend it.
Right.
Right.
And on a balance sheet, the important things for a small business owner to understand and to look at are the assets and the liabilities. So you want to see what you have available to you as assets and what you owe on them. And that's what the balance sheet is telling you. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
So the next statement that's very important is the profit and loss. It's also called the income statement or profit statement, things like that. It basically just shows your business profitability over a given period of time. So you can do monthly, quarterly, yearly, you can do daily or weekly, but over a given period of time, it tells you how profitable your company is. And so you have revenue minus expenses equals your profit. And that's a little bit janky. There's a few steps in between, but you take your total revenue and subtract all the expenses that you have, and then you should have your net income. So really how it goes is there's a few different categories within the profit and loss. First, you do have your revenue, and then just under that, you have your top of the line expenses, or what we call cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold are the direct expenses related to paying for the revenue. So, raw materials, inventory purchases, costs of direct labor, things like that fall under cost of goods sold. And revenue minus your cost of goods sold is equal to what we call gross revenue or gross profit. And then you subtract all your ordinary business expenses. So, administrative, rent, insurance, legal, utilities, things like that. And then you kind of end up with your net income. And so that's what the profit and loss is all about, just showing what your income is.
So I think a lot of business people, especially new business people, they make the mistake of conflating revenue with profit.
It's a very common one. I'll have a lot of people come in and say, I made $1 million last year, and really you had $1 million in revenue, but after all the expenses, you lost money.
Right. They like to brag about their revenue, but one maxim that I learned early on is it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep.
That is 100% true. Yeah, it's all about what you take home at the end of the day. Speaking of what you take home, is the next statement is the statement of cash flows. So net profits does not always equate to what you take home at the end of the day. And so the statement of cash flow makes up that difference to actually show how much cash you're increasing or losing every month. And one of the most common things that is not on the profit and loss that people get confused on that does show up on the statement of cash flow is your debt service. So you don't expense. Loans are not an expense when you pay off the principal of loan. You can expense the interest, but not the principal. Just like loans, when you get a loan, is not income. So that lives on your balance sheet, long-term loans, and when you pay those off, it does not affect your profit and loss, but it will affect your statement of cash flows. So that's the next important one to have on there, statement of cash flows and understanding the difference between net income and cash flow.
Okay.
And the last statement is the statement of retained earnings. This is not as vital for small businesses. This is mostly used for larger businesses, but it just shows the retained earnings over time. Retained earnings are cash that you have increased that you've kept in the account, and that shows up in your equity portion of the balance sheet, and that gives a little more detail into the equity or value of your company. But again, small businesses don't really bother with it too much.
So, the thing with all this for me is all of this makes my eyes glaze over.
Yep.
I know it's important, but where the real importance comes in for me, and again, I'm going to say this is something that I've really has come into focus since we've been doing business together, since you've been my accountant and are able to explain these things. What it really does for me is be able to let me know where I'm really at and what I can and cannot invest in, what I can and cannot do. If I want to buy a machine that costs $50,000, can I afford it? And if I can afford it, then what's the best way to buy it?
Yep.
Those types of things.
Absolutely. And it's very important to understand kind of each of these statements. And a great example from our time together on Working Something is when we went and visited that building, and we were thinking about buying this office building because we needed some office space. So we were thinking, why not just buy one that's already making money? And we went over and looked, and they showed us the profit and loss, and it was making $80,000 a year, which, great. We can make $80,000 a year and have some office space. But by the time you add in the necessary capital improvements and the debt service that we'd have to pay, we may have a $80,000 net profit, but we're certainly not cash flowing $80,000.
Right.
So understanding how to read all of these statements is really the most important thing for a small business owner. You want to be able to understand what's on your balance sheet and what your profit and loss is, and then finally what is your cash flow. So if you can just take a little time to give yourself a brief overview of these financial statements and how they're created, then you're going to be much better shape.
Another thing that's come up recently for me where that's important is I'm thinking about selling one of my other businesses, and just being able to hand over the balance sheet or the profit and loss or the statement of cash flow and know that this information is correct and it's verifiable. So if they were to audit it in the process of purchasing the business, then they wouldn't find anything that's questionable and everything checks out. So therefore, the amount that we're asking is well within the realm of what is standard and acceptable for a business,
Yep, absolutely. So there are 5 types of accounts on these financial statements that we have to just give a brief definition for. The first one is assets. So assets are anything that you own, which is cash, receivables, fixed assets, which are things like equipment, vehicles, building, things of that nature. And then there are other kind of current assets like security deposits and things like that, maybe advances to your employees. But that's assets. It's things that you either own or are due to you. Liabilities are the opposite of that. They're things that you owe. So payables, loans, notes, accrued taxes, things of that nature, things that the company or you personally owe are considered liabilities. And then equity, again, we talked about that earlier, considered the value of the company. And then finally, the other 2 accounts are revenue, which is money received or earned, and expenses, which is money the business has to pay. And these five accounts make up the all the different items that are on your chart of accounts. So every every accounting software, QuickBooks is the most common, so I said that, but every accounting software or accounting method in general has what's called a chart of accounts, and they list everything out. So if you have 3 bank accounts, you have 3 different assets listed as bank accounts, and then you have all the different liabilities and equity and then your sales and all your different expense categories. Those fall under a chart of accounts, but all of the accounts on there fall under one of these categories. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So that's kind of the basics of accounting. Again, we'll go over a lot more on how to.
Can we say equity is like if you had to sell everything, what would be left over would be what that's your equity in the business.
Yeah, that's your equity in the business. Similar to equity in a house. Like, if you were to sell the house, how much, value do you have over the liability that you own? So,
right. Okay.
Yeah, very simple. The next thing we're going to talk about a little bit is, actually, it's a difference. I didn't write it on here. Sorry, John, so you're just going to have to listen to this one. Is how to deal with your different expenses. So, you have to be able to easily record all of your transactions. And we'll talk a little bit about software here in a second, but the most important thing is if you have a small business, you need some type of banking or credit cards or something to show your expenses on. The easiest way, set up a business bank account, set up a credit card account, and then all of your transactions will be there. All the money you make, deposit it to your account. All the money you spend it out of one of those accounts, and then it's easily trackable.
So when I started this business, I couldn't get any kind of a business credit card from anyone, so I used personal credit cards.
Yep.
Now, as you've told me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a single person LLC, so I'm the sole owner, then that is treated by the IRS as a sole proprietorship or basically just a simple business, right?
Correct. And we'll get to that a little bit later, but yes, that's absolutely accurate.
So in that situation, it wasn't that bad of a deal to use my personal credit cards, right?
Yeah. Other accountants may disagree with me on this one, but I'm of the opinion that you need to figure out a way to make your business work in any way possible. So if you need to put stuff on a credit card and you cannot get a business line of credit, fine, use your personal card. But make sure that you're paying attention to which transactions are on there. Go through your statement, highlight them so that you have them, put them in an Excel spreadsheet, something like that. So you're tracking all of your business expenses.
That's when it becomes even more important to do
Correct.
that, because you don't want to, like, especially if you have an LLC or something like that, you don't want to, what do they call it, piercing the corporate veil or something? Or?
That is correct. Yeah, it's always better to have a business bank account and a business credit card, and everything is just under the business, and not to have any personal expenses out of your business accounts or your credit card account. But you want to do that not to the detriment of your business. In my opinion, anyway. Other accountants might call me crazy. They'll say, oh, you're going to get screwed, or you're going to have the corporate veil pierced, which that's a very specific definition of your LLC offers you limited protection from getting sued, so your personal assets aren't sued. But if you intermingle your personal expenses with your business expenses, the courts can claim that your LLC is not valid, and so they can go after your personal accounts. But it is, in my opinion, more important to get your business off the ground. So do everything you can to do the right thing, but if you have to cut some corners using a personal card, using a personal account, that is okay. Just try to limit it and get it corrected as fast as you can.
But just make sure that you're booking everything correctly.
Correct. And so there's two sides to bookkeeping, which is what we're talking about now. There is the invoicing, and then there's the payable side. And so my kind of tips on invoicing is really make sure that you're keeping good track. Now, accounting softwares have great resources for that. If you refuse to use an accounting software for a little while, that's okay. There's invoicing software, or there's just good old-fashioned, Excel spreadsheets. You can make up your own invoice. But you really want to pay attention to tracking every single job or, sale or whatever. Point of sale systems work at retail shops, those kind of things. I have met with several business owners who've done, big jobs, and then they just forget to get paid because they're moving on to the next job,
That happens, and then it's really hard sometimes to untangle it, especially especially if someone claims they paid you.
Right. Yeah. And if you don't have real good tracking, which again, the software comes in handy, it's hard to know what you got paid on. And it's really hard to piece all that together, particularly if you have a common service. So like a lot of my clients pay me the same amount every single month. And so if I don't have an invoice and then tie the payment to the invoice, I might not know who paid me that month if I don't record it, So it's really important to have some kind of good tracking for your payments, because you will get screwed. And even I'm an accountant, I'm very good at it, and even I've got shorted a few times or miscounted or not got paid on things.
Yeah, it's especially good as well, because sometimes some of those big ones, if you're not paying attention to it, you could find yourself coming up short to pay payroll and things like that because you were expecting money to come in and you just hadn't paid attention to it.
Right. So some type of software, or again, Excel's okay, but software is the best way to use. And I would recommend QuickBooks. We'll talk a little bit more about software, but the invoicing stuff for most of that, or a point of sale system, is really key to track all of your invoicing.
I just want to make a comment in general, though. This isn't really about accounting as much as it is about logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So when people buy from me, when they order a custom case,
Yeah.
I make them pay in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will balk at that and they will say, oh, why am I paying you before the case is made? And I say it simply like this. Once I do all the work, especially if it's a custom case, and very especially if it has your name on it, it becomes far easier for you to chase me for the case than it is for me to chase you for the money. Because I'm the one that has a reputation to lose. I'm the one that has a company that's in one place. So if I don't make your case on time, you can go to the public, and say, hey, this guy's screwing me, right?
Yep.
But if I go to the public and I say, and then the public opinion will be the one that gets me to get off my ass and make your case, right? But if I switch it around and I go to the public and I say, hey, I've got this case I made and this guy's not paying me, then everyone's going to go, oh, that guy's a piece of shit. I hope he gets karma coming to him, but nobody's going to get me paid.
Yeah. Well, and I think we both have stories about being held hostage or not getting paid by clients. I myself did a huge job. I set aside 2 weeks for one specific client and was expecting a big paycheck early on, and he stiffed me after I did all the work. So now I almost refuse to do any work unless I really know the person without at least a half upfront deposit.
Yeah, no, it's you have to do it because it's one of those things where most people are going to be good and they're going to pay their invoices on time, but the percentage of people that slow pay you or don't pay you, not only can it hurt you financially, but it just hurts internally. It's just like, you did the work, where's my pay?
Yeah.
And if people work for you, they expect to get paid. Imagine if I did that to my employees and I said, oh, you know what, I'm just not going to pay you this week.
Yeah.
You can wait a week or two, can't you? That would be ridiculous.
Well, it happens more often than you think, though. So.
Yeah, I know it does. I mean, we've had people play those games, and it happens a lot with bigger companies doing it to smaller companies because they know that those smaller companies can't really afford to sue for the money. Mm-hmm. They can't afford to take the time to sue for the money,
Yep.
and
Well, there's not much recourse either to not getting paid as a small business. So as much as possible, I think it's a great tip to get paid upfront, or at least not give them their item or goods or service until they pay you.
There was a famous lawyer who made a practice out of stiffing contractors. Mm-hmm. So he would either stiff them outright, or he would offer to pay pennies on the dollar, for the agreed on, less than the agreed on price.
And more often than not, they'd accept just because they can't fight it.
Yeah, and he would basically say, if you don't like it, sue me. Mm-hmm. Because he knew that he could tie them up in court for a long time, and eventually, if he lost in court, he would pay it, but he could pay at any time and just kill the suit.
Yep.
And so that's how he used it. So he would get people to acquiesce that way.
It's a mess.
And it was terrible. And he finally got lost several of those suits that when people had enough and said, fine, I will sue you. And he ended up losing quite a lot, from it. But who knows how many hundreds or thousands of people he did that to before he finally got a comeuppance.
Yeah. That's a good word. I was actually just thinking about that when you said it. So on the flip side of your invoicing and your revenue is the expenses or accounts payable. This is a little individual for everybody. They'll kind of have to decide what works best for them. But I will tell you that I have seen tons of companies come through my office and just be nickeled and dimed to death by late fees and penalties and interest for not paying things on time. So it is vitally important to not only have like a schedule of what payments are going out and what are due, but also really important to kind of track those invoices as best you can. Have a file folder at your office, save the receipts, save your payment stuff, make sure that you're keeping track of everything on those expenses.
I will never, ever not be sick when I think of the amount of money that I have spent in penalties for the simple act of not filing the tax return on time and not asking for an extension.
Yeah, that's a brutal one. But again, even just those $50, late penalty at Cox, or the $100 you forgot to pay your phone bill that month. These things are easy to overlook. You've got 1,800 things going on because you're a small business. You're trying to do everything to keep it going. You're wearing many hats. Sometimes the accounting falls to the back end. So
one thing I like to do is I like to kind of set it and forget it. So as much as possible, I like to put it on auto pay.
It's great if you can.
Now, I know one of the people that I worked with before, they used to pay all their invoices on their like American Express cards, and then they accrued so many points they were able to take lots of trips.
It's a great idea.
But my biggest thing is as you said, not wanting to get in trouble, not wanting to, because there's two things there that come to mind is not only are you saving yourself from those penalties and everything, but you're also retaining credit with these people that you're dealing with. And some of these people, they actually report any late payments.
Yes.
To credit bureaus,
Very
which
quickly,
then
sometimes
affects you negatively on your credit score, personal and business.
Yeah. Another little tip on those invoices that you're paying out is sometimes you'll see things like net 30, net 60, net 90. That means you have that many days to pay them, and it needs to be received before those days. Some people claim like if I postmark it by that day, then it's good enough, which usually most people don't get too upset about. But pay real close attention to when everything is due, and really you can negotiate those a lot of times with your vendors. So if you're in a business where your main supplier gives you stuff and maybe you don't sell it for 30 to 60 days, you can usually negotiate with them like, hey, can we get a net 90 term here or something like that. So just a little thought for helping your business out. The next thing we're going to talk about is software. I've already mentioned it a few times. QuickBooks is kind of the gold standard there for small businesses. There is an online version and a desktop version. I much prefer the desktop version, but that's just because I've used it for so long and I work very fast on it. The desktop or online version can be a little clunky, but it does download your transactions, and if you get it set up correctly, it'll integrate and be very fast every month. So there is something to be said for that online. If you can kind of get it working correctly, it really saves you a lot of time, makes things easy. You can access it from anywhere. The desktop's a little bit harder, it's just on a computer or something like that.
When I was using QuickBooks, I used both. The one thing I liked but also turned out to be a negative on the online version was that I could have multiple versions, multiple windows open.
Yeah.
So I could see different things. But where that was a negative a little bit is because if I made a mistake in one of those windows, then it would automatically affect everything. So it kind of allowed me to split my concentration and made it easier to make a mistake, hence the double entry of a lot of things, where I effectively doubled all the transactions in several accounts.
The big kind of reason I like the desktop version the best is because they have a better or more robust accountant version that I can make corrections on much faster. So it's very easy for me to reclassify a bunch of transactions, move things around, do a couple quick journal entries to get your books correct. The online version is a little more difficult to correct. But if you can get the online version working and you're paying attention to it and you really do understand it, it can be nice for small businesses. So they have great invoicing tracking, and they have some great bill pay. They even have, I think, options to pay using their software. So it's pretty great. QuickBooks is kind of the one I like to use. I complain a lot about it. There's a lot of features I wish were better, but it is, I think, the best out there. So not that we need a sponsorship or anything from, but there are some other ones out there. I don't know if Quicken's still doing their thing, and there's some much bigger programs. Like eventually, if you scale your business, you will graduate from QuickBooks and need a more robust accounting software or a client relations management software, something like that that will integrate. There's also some great POS systems that have built-in accounting, so you can use that as well. And then there are industry-specific ones. So there's one I'm somewhat familiar with, or was in the past, is Yardi. That is very specific for real estate management. So it helps with the pro rata share of like CAM expenses and taxes and things like that at different deals, and it makes the year-end CAM reconciliations much easier. So that is a commercial real estate specific software. But there are other industries. There's trucking ones and some specific retail shops, a lot of marijuana ones we deal with. So,
okay. Well, I would say then take some time to really, really study these things and figure out which one's best for you. One problem I always had with QuickBooks or any of these things is inventory tracking. So you either need to figure out a way to do that that's outside of QuickBooks where you can bring in what you need, or QuickBooks also has inventory.
They do.
Figure out how to use it correctly.
Yeah, I think they have an add-on program that works pretty well for inventory.
Right. They also have invoicing that goes along with that as well. So you can kind of use it as a POS in a way.
Yep. I will say that it is a very good idea if you're brand new to QuickBooks to make sure that you do some online tutorials and stuff like that. You can also hire someone like me or another QuickBook professional. They also have a thing called QuickBook Pro Advisors that can set you up. So they can get it all set up and integrated properly, even get your first couple of bank statements downloaded so that it's working properly, and then you can do it yourself.
They also have bookkeeping as well, if I remember right.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, they wouldn't do my bookkeeping because they said my bookkeeping was such a mess and it was like 4 years in arrears or something like that.
Yeah.
So don't let it get behind. You know,
right.
The main thrust of all this with the software, in my opinion, and I'm speaking from experience, is know what you're doing if you're going to use it. Like just take the time to really learn it, you know. And I know it's, for a lot of people, it's like me, it's going to make your eyes glaze over and it's boring as hell, but it's so essential. And don't let it get so far behind that you're overwhelmed or anybody else that looks at it is overwhelmed, because all that does is just create stress.
My suggestion for small businesses is set aside a little bit of time, either every day or every week, but don't go much longer than that. And just set aside even like 10, 15 minutes a day. Just double check your invoicing is all right, make sure all your expenses are uploaded properly, and then move on. If it's one of those things that if you just set aside, 15 minutes a day or maybe an hour a week, that you'll be ahead of the curve the whole time. If you wait 2-3 months and you've got 3 months of transactions you got to put in, you're like, man, that's 5 hours of work now. I got to do all that work, and it gets out of hand. So
it's a chore that's not fun.
Yeah.
But you know what is fun? What is fun is knowing where you're at and being able to see that money and be able to see, where exactly the money is and how strong your business is and what you can invest in, what you can afford, what you can't, It shows you so much insight into different aspects of your business when you really know where you're at. And, Scott was talking a moment ago about all the nickel and diming from being late on invoices. Well, there's another aspect of this that's really important, is there are places where you can be leaking money.
Yeah.
You can have subscriptions, for example. You can have $200 a month in subscriptions. Or, for example, I had a thing where we were actually getting scammed. There was somebody that had figured out how to do how to do withdrawal by check.
Yep.
And they were withdrawing $200 a month, 2 times $99, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this went on for over 24 months before I finally caught it.
Yeah, and that's just because you're not looking at stuff every
right,
day.
and you're not looking at it. I would have caught that in the first month if I'd have seen it. I would have been like, what the hell's this, right? They literally created a check as if it was written from us. Like we were giving them a check, and then they were depositing it electronically using the what do they call it? The ETF? No, I forget. Electronic ETF system, right? And when I went to look it up as to what this was about, like who the payee was, it just was like scam. This is a scam. This, and it was several different versions of it, but it was basically all the same thing, same type of scam. So I was mad at Chase because I was like, you guys should have seen this. You should have protected me. But they were like, we're not the ones that are looking at your account. You're supposed to be looking at your account.
It's very common. I had one go on for about 4 or 5 months that was like $8 or something, and
Yeah,
you just don't notice little transactions like that. And then, if they did that to 10,000 people, they're making a bunch of money.
Yeah,
So,
or subscriptions that you sign up to.
Yeah.
I've had probably times when I've had $100 in subscriptions, things that I signed up to that I thought, oh yeah, let's try that. This seems like a good business program that I could use or something,
and then you
right?
never use it again.
And then I don't use it, and then I forget, and then they start charging me after the trial period, and then it just goes on.
Yeah. So next we're going to talk a little bit about income taxes, and really, again, that's the other point of making good financial statements, not only to tell where you're at, but to do taxes at the end of the year. And so we use the balance sheet and the profit and loss to do your taxes. Your net income is typically your taxable income, and so that's what you're paying taxes on. There are 4 kind of main types of taxes that small business owners are going to face. The first one you mentioned before is the sole proprietorship, which that is filed on a Schedule C. So it's on your just personal tax return, profit and loss from business. Sole proprietorships are just single owner LLCs. Sometimes a husband and wife who file a joint return can file a Schedule C even if they're 50-50, but talk with your tax professional before that happens. They're considered a disregarded entity for the purposes of IRS. So that's why this form is not separate. It's just a schedule that is filed on your personal tax return. It's pretty straightforward. Even if you're an LLC, if you're just one owner, you're still filing.
So Schedule C basically means an additional piece of paper that's filed with your personal tax return.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, not a separate form. The next 3 are separate tax returns. So the next one that's very common is the partnership return, or it's Form 1065. And so that is when there are more than one owner of an LLC. You file this separate tax return, and each of the owners receive a K-1. And the K-1 shows your share of the business income, distributions, and all that stuff. And that then, K-1, is included on your personal return. The next one that we commonly see is an S-Corp. S-Corps are the most kind of common trick that people use for taxes. It helps to avoid self-employment tax, which I'll talk about in a minute. But very similar to the partnership return, you can have a one-owner S-Corp though, but you still receive a K-1, and those are then shown on your personal tax return. So for these first 3, Schedule C, Form 1065, and the S-Corp, Form 1120S, those are all shown the income on your personal tax return. The business itself will never owe income taxes on those forms. So the business doesn't owe anything. You may have like a penalty or interest if you filed late, but those don't owe actual income taxes. Those just show what the business made, and then they're included on your personal tax return. The final one is the C Corp, or the Form 1120. This is a completely separate entity. This pays its own share of taxes. The entity is completely separate from the owners. There are shareholders that may own portions of it, but the C Corp is a separate tax return, and it pays its own taxes. You, as a shareholder, if you own part of an S Corp, will receive a 1099 DIV, or 1099 dividend, to show how much money you made out of the company. And that's typically where you hear this double taxes for corporations. People, you may have heard that before, because you're taxed. The C Corp itself is taxed, and then you're also taxed on your dividends that you receive from the company.
So it is factually a double tax?
It is. There are some times where it's very advantageous to have that, even though, quote unquote, double taxed. But again, do not be doing a corporation without a tax professional guiding you through that process. In fact, don't even do an S Corp without a tax professional guiding you.
Is this something that a normal person can create by themselves?
They absolutely can. You can create a C Corp, you can create an S Corp, you can create a partnership all by yourself. Partnerships you could do by yourself. They're not terribly complicated, and the K-1's pretty simple. But the S Corp has real specific regulations, particularly with owner payroll, that have to be followed. And C Corps, are not advantageous unless a tax
So what-
person's doing it.
What can happen if you don't follow these procedures correctly?
Mostly you just get fined out the wazoo. So you're just paying penalties and interest. So it is 5% a month for non-filing penalty and 5% a month for non-paying penalty. There are estimated tax penalties if you don't pay your taxes ahead of time properly. And then there's lots of other fines and interest.
Don't they have to
charged.
pay like quarterly as well?
Sometimes it depends. There's a thing called estimated tax payments, which sometimes you have to pay. Your tax professional or whoever does your taxes will take care of that. Really, you just have to pay either 90% or if you are a high income earner, 110% of what you paid last year in order to avoid those penalties. But again,
So are we saying
somewhat
basically
complicated.
in general, you want to try to be an S corp?
No. So
No?
an S
Okay.
corp is only advantageous at certain income levels, and then
Okay.
it does not become advantageous anymore. So for your business, we have JB Cases set up as an S corp. We get good tax advantage there. The Chester's is not an S corp.
Got
That
it.
is just regular. We have that as a Schedule C because there's not enough tax advantage for the income level that you're at.
Understand. Okay.
And the S corps, the whole kind of trick of that is to avoid self-employment tax. So I want to talk just briefly on self-employment tax. Self-employment tax is basically an additional tax on your personal return, and it is 15.3%. And where that number came from is FICA taxes. So if you've worked a regular W-2 job, you've probably seen where Social Security and Medicare get deducted. Social Security is 6.2% and Medicare is 1.45%, a total of 7.65% that is withheld from your paycheck. The employer who employs you has to match that amount. So they have to match the FICA amount, and then that's submitted to the government for your Social Security and Medicare. Those two numbers together, 15.3%. So you as a self-employed person, you're not avoiding the FICA taxes. You still got to pay them. They hit
So
you
you
with
basically
both.
pay double. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So you got to be really pay attention
it makes
to that.
sense because, basically the government wants 15.3% from every human that's working.
Correct. Now, the S Corp does have the neat trick that they don't have to pay self-employment tax on all of their earnings, only a portion of them. So that's where it can be advantageous depending on your income level. But again, I always make the suggestion that if you're going to be an S corporation, you better hire me to do it for you. Don't do it yourself. Because if you're late on one of the forms, you have to file payroll reports. You have to receive the correct officer salary, which has to be reasonable based on your net income. If you are not using a tax professional, the penalties and interest are going to far outweigh what you actually saved.
So famously, like when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he was taking pay of $1 a year,
Yeah.
but he was taking basically compensation in stock.
Yeah.
How would that work for some? And I know that that's way out of the realm of what we're talking about as far as small business goes.
Yeah, so
But
those
just as a
are
point of
considered
interest.
benefits that you get as an employee. A lot of times employees will receive as part of their compensation package stock in the company. And so a C corporation is allowed to issue multiple kinds of stock, and so that's when that's the kind of company.
But
that
would he
you're-
effectively pay? Would he have effectively paid tax if he was only getting $1 a year?
when
and-
he sold the stock?
Only when he sold the
He
stock.
received the stock, and when he sold it, that's when he gets a capital gain based on the basis of when he received it. Yeah, so.
So if he had enough money saved up to just live, he could have effectively just lived forever without ever selling the stock.
That's correct, and that happens sometimes too because when you pass away and you inherited it, the inheritee, I guess, I don't know, whoever inherits your stock, they get a stepped up basis for stuff, so they don't have to pay capital gains on huge portions of it if they don't want to.
People don't like to think about stuff like this, but if something happens to you or whatever, I think that an accountant can really help you to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but can really help you to learn how to set up all your assets and everything to protect them as much as possible, as much as legally possible, from taxes.
Yep. Always great to find somebody. So the last couple things on taxes I want to talk about just very briefly, depreciation. So depreciation can sometimes be confusing for people, but anything that you purchase for your business that is a piece of equipment or a regularly used thing. Leasehold improvements, increasing the value of the building, signs outside your building are considered assets, and assets are depreciated. So $2,500 is the typical limit that we use. Anything above that, that's a recurring useful item we consider an asset. And assets are depreciated, and there are many different types of depreciation. There's also bonus depreciation. I'm not going to get into it, but those won't show up on your profit and loss. They'll show up on your balance sheet as assets, and then they're depreciated over time. And then the last thing is, when you became an expert, you should have learned kind of what industry you were in back in our second step of phase one. You should look up at this time different credits. So there are lots of credits and industry specific stuff that you can get that you want to make sure your accountant is aware of. Just recently I was talking with somebody about research and development credits. There's some specific small business tax credits that can be got through research and development, and their particular accountant didn't know anything about it. So they were asking me if I knew something about it, and I know a little bit, but I would have to do more research on that specific one is what I told them. But just because I'm an accountant doesn't mean I know the entire tax code. It's ludicrous. There's way too much to know.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if applied correctly, I can get credit for my research into the dipshittery of customers on Facebook?
Yeah, no, but good thought. So, but in this step, just make sure you spend a little bit of time looking at the credits that might apply to your industry. And then the last thing, and we can be done with accounting because I could go on for days, is when to hire someone. So I really suggest you hire somebody for a consultation right away when you're starting a business. Have them look over your business plan, have them look over your structures, and make sure that everything's kind of fallen in line with what they suggest. A $500 or $1,000 consultation for somebody who's in your who knows your industry, who knows accounting, who can help you kind of guide in the right direction will save you a ton of money in the future. You don't necessarily need to hire a bookkeeper right out of the gate, but it is advisable if you can find somebody to just make sure that everything's being done correctly. And then I highly suggest that you don't try to do your own taxes. Hire somebody at the end of the year, pay the extra money to have somebody just file the taxes. If you have the QuickBooks or a financial statement or even all of your expenses in a spreadsheet, your accountant does not charge as much. So if I have to do financials for people, which means they dump on me bags of receipts and bank statements and credit card statements, and I have to go through all of them, I charge a fortune. But I do not charge a fortune if you just bring me everything in a nice, easy spreadsheet that I can sort and do quickly. So my suggestion on to hire somebody day one to at least look it over, and then make sure you have at least a professional doing your taxes every year, and then kind of graduate eventually to a bookkeeper and maybe a monthly review type thing.
I'll say this, the only business that has been started in my family that we are not partners on, you and I, but is Lubu's, right? And the fact that Lulu could come to you, talk about it all, kind of lay it all out, has been such a stress reliever for her, because now she knows where she's at. She knows how much she's invested. She knows, kind of she's free to think about things like how I'm going to do the marketing, and she's already budgeted for that. So she's not worried about what she's spending because it's already, in effect, it's already spent in the budget.
Yeah.
So she's good with it, and so she's very free to be creative and figure out, cool ways to market her product, and she's having a lot of fun with it.
Yep. And it's great also just to get another set of eyes on stuff, even just a few minutes of somebody's time to look over the projections that you put together, the budget. I guarantee they'll find something you forgot about or be able to add 2 cents to make it worth the money that you pay.
Or like the building, that we talked about. It's my initial thought, was this looks great on paper, let's buy it.
Yeah.
Right? And then, as we looked at it, and you looked at it from an accountant's point of view, I sobered up very quickly in understanding that, it wasn't such a good deal, and it could develop into a major headache, and also a financial boon for us. Not a boon, but a
The
debt,
opposite of a
or a
boon.
debt, the opposite of a boon.
Yeah, it would have been a money pit.
Pain, yeah, a money pit. There you go.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, what'd you think, man? Did your eyes glaze over? How long did I go? Did I go a whole hour, Calvin?
Yeah.
Did we do our... Damn, I'm sorry. I tried to keep it short, but...
no, you did great. I think we only went an hour because I kept interrupting you.
Fair enough.
So, I was trying to interject a little bit of humor in there somewhere.
Well, I don't think it was too bad, but those are sort of the highlights for your bookkeeping and accounting, and you as the small business owner should need... again, we'll have a lot more information on turtlesmith.com, and hopefully you guys have a basic understanding of the accounting procedures.
The most important thing that I can say as a businessman who didn't put a lot of value in accounting, because I always thought to myself, oh, it's so expensive and it's so much of a hassle, is you're probably going to lose a lot more than you will spend on the accountant.
Yeah.
That's one thing, right? Because you're just not going to do it right. It's like you wrote on here, accounting is a 4-year degree, so it's impossible to discuss in 30 minutes. Well, guess what? It's even more impossible to learn proper accounting while you're trying to run your business.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee you that if you have a tax professional do your taxes at the end of the year, they're gonna save you at least a little money. So it's gonna be worth having them in your corner helping you out.
Now, one thing I would ask though is, so I often see a commercial on Facebook, as I'm going through it, and it's always the same guy with the same thing. He's like, if you're having an accountant prepare your books or your taxes or whatever, you're definitely losing money, is his pitch.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that probably rankles you when you hear that kind of a pitch from someone.
Yeah, a little.
But basically what he's trying to say is we're smarter than your accountant, right?
Yeah.
So if we know things that your accountant doesn't know. And I guess it's similar to people saying, like doctors don't keep up with the latest information or something like that. I don't know. I've never gone further than watching the thing. But my question to you, though, is how should people know? Like, I had one accountant where several years after he filed the taxes for us, we got a letter from the IRS saying we owed another $12,000 because something wasn't done right on there. And how does one know, though? How would one find out whether an accountant is good or not? Like
It's really tough, and the accounting world is sort of can be sort of a lawless wasteland of hucksters. You don't have to have a bunch of credentials to file taxes. You have to be you have to get an EFIN, or an e-file identification number to file taxes through the software. But you don't really have to have super, legit credentials to open a business. So, for example, I don't have a CPA license. I'm just enrolled with the IRS. But I've studied and I worked really hard, and I came up through multiple accounting companies, and I'm savvy enough to do most taxes. I myself have a kind of specialty of small businesses, and I can do most small business industries. But there's some things that I don't mess with. Like, I don't do oil accounting. I have an accountant that does the oil that I'm invested in. She is an expert in oil and gas accounting. And so one of the things I like to usually ask accountants is, what's your specialty? What's your field? And if they say that they know the entire tax code and are geniuses and know everything that there is to know, and they could file any type of tax return, I usually think they're full of shit, or they're Rain Man, one or the other,
So would you, like if you're a small business, you're
Mm-hmm.
starting out, would somebody be okay to go like an H&R Block or something like that, or like you see at Walmart during tax season? Or
I don't want to shit on H&R Block, but I would avoid those. I would avoid the ones at Walmart. I would find an actual accountant, a CPA or a small business accountant like myself, and go to like a local firm. You will usually find a guy who's real sharp, real savvy, knows his stuff, and will help you out, or gal. I didn't mean just guy, but you'll usually find somebody that's great and that you get along with and you can talk to. If you go to H&R Block, you're going to get a different person every year. They're going to be okay, but not amazing. It's worth paying the extra money, and it's not as expensive as you think it'll be.
So,
especially if you've done all your accounting.
Would it be a good idea to ask around with your business friends and things like that and see who they're happy with?
Yeah, 100%. That's, I mean, like I think
I got a guy method.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. 90% of my clients are referrals. So
Okay.
yeah, you can find people that are great, and just go meet them and talk to them. You'll know pretty quick. And if you've spent the time learning the basics of accounting, you'll know real fast if they know what they're talking about.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I don't think that was boring at all. I was really dreading this episode. But,
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad I kept you entertained for at least a little while.
Well, I mean, it was more entertaining for me too because I have been through all the shit that comes with not doing it right.
Yeah, that's true.
And I feel so much at ease now. I know if there's anything at all that I'm thinking about, I can just pick up the phone and call you or send you a text and you come pretty quick with the answer. And there have been times when you have said, no, that's not a good idea, and here's why. And you've made it clear financially, and I've been, okay, fine, I'll let that dream die and move on to the next one.
There you go.
This episode is sponsored by JB Cases. JB Cases is a pool cue case company specializing in custom cases. They have been in business since 2007, and their motto is true protection, true durability, true comfort, and true custom. Visit them at jbcases.com.
Well, on to our next segment. We're talking about Abandonware today. So this is actually kind of relevant with the accounting software. QuickBooks, they stop supporting old versions of QuickBooks. Every year I got to update to the new one. Sometimes I skip a year to save a little money, but I jump from 22 to 24. But I'm starting to get notices right now in late 2024, not to time ourselves too much, but that our 22 is no longer going to be updating the payroll. So I've got to update all the books to the new software.
QuickBooks has the best business model, don't they?
They really do. They get you, and every year I keep buying more crap from them, but
once they get their hooks in,
you got to do it. It'd be impossible now for me to switch because I'd have to basically shut everybody's books down, do a journal entry into a new software, and then start a new one.
So now that isn't exactly abandonware, is it? That's just basically them forcing you into upgrades.
Yeah. Well, but they abandoned the old versions.
Well, so is that something because of new information that they have to have for taxes and all that, or is that something you think that they could just put into the old one as well?
It's the payroll software, but yeah, I mean they could if they wanted to put the time and energy into it. I don't know how hard it is. I'm not a coder.
I would bet that it's more along the lines of them saying that they have to do it, rather than actually having to do it, because they could probably set it up where. Well,
they have to update the new version, so I don't know how hard it is then to update the old version.
I'm sure they could update the old version, at least as far as tax rates and things like that go.
Well, that's all I have to deal with, but there is a serious problem in the world with abandonware. I had just recently read an article, which is the reason we're talking about it, is a lot of scientific research data is still held on very old software that the company has now gone out of business. There are no updates, and there's nobody in the world to fix it. And I've also heard things of entire HR and payroll records being on some computer under somebody's desk. For a multi-billion-dollar company, there's just one little Dell desktop under somebody's desk in Milwaukee that holds all this information, and they're too afraid to turn it on or off because
it sounds like a movie.
They'll lose it all.
That sounds like the plot of a movie.
Yeah, well, it does, but those are things that happen if you're not keeping updated, and I don't think it's so prevalent in. Right now, with the cloud and everything, usually things get updated, but there's a lot of old programs that are still in use but are no longer serviced. So I think it's important for small business owners to really pay attention to what they're purchasing and what they're saddling themselves with, and making sure that they're using a company that is going to still be around in 10 or 20 years. So that they
I bought a hard disk that was supposed to be a backup for all my stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And this is from a company that's still in business. It's Western Digital, is what it was.
Yeah.
And it's it's marketed as a backup. I forget exactly what they call it, but anyway, it's essentially basically a hard disk, that has an internet connection.
Right.
And two things come to mind there. This is not really Abandonware, but Cox charged me extra for backing up all my stuff because it went through the network in my house,
Oh.
And they metered that and said, you have to pay for that. So that I was pissed off about that. So I had to go to an unlimited bandwidth for that. But then the thing that was worse is the thing stopped working, and there's nothing to fix it. They changed the software on it, and now their new software will not access the old one.
Yeah.
And there's literally no way with the company to get to that data. So I imagine that there might be a way if I tear it apart and then actually take the hard drive out, then I might be able to stick some kind of reader on it and maybe get it. But through their own software that you access through the internet, it will not access that drive. And they tell you on there that, sorry, it basically is a version of, sorry, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So all the backup that I have on there, the designs that I've done, whatever, that I don't have anywhere else, are just gone until I can find a way to access that drive.
It's wild. That's wild. That's the article that I was looking at. It was talking specifically about research data. There was this guy talking about how he had bought a microscope and the software to use the microscope was very specific. They spent $150,000 on this thing just to use it, and then the company just went out of business, and so they have no updates. But that led me kind of down the Google rabbit hole, and one of the scarier ones was I guess there's some implants that are becoming abandonware. They're not, the company's gone out of business, or there's no updates for some of these medical devices that are implanted in people. Can you imagine?
Is so freaking scary.
It's terrifying, isn't it? So he's got the article up here, but it says that, let's see, you've probably had a company not support one of your devices, whether it was a speaker or smartphone, but what happens if a medical implant is no longer supported? That is terrifying to me. If I had some kind of pacemaker or something in my body.
That's ridiculously
under
scary,
support.
Especially, have you ever seen the ones that are the mechanical hearts that they've put into pigs and stuff?
Yeah.
Where they can literally take out a real heart and they put a mechanical heart in there. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, you go for 10 years with it just fine. All of a sudden it starts
Yeah.
malfunctioning. They're like, nobody
Can
knows how to
update
fix
it.
it.
Yeah. And especially a lot of these things are updated now through Bluetooth and stuff like that. And
Yeah. Well, I get worried too about what's that deal that Elon Musk is doing?
the Neuralink.
Yeah, Neuralink. What happens if you get an old version of that and they're like, we're not bothering with that.
Coincidentally, I've got a pool playing friend who's on the cusp of creating a company that is outperforming Neuralink.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's if things go the way he thinks, then he's going to be a billionaire within
That's a bold
couple
statement.
of years.
Outcompeting Neuralink. He's
Yeah.
going to outcompete the Musk.
He's outperforming Neuralink.
Is he?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see. But it was kind of interesting because it looks like there's an institute for functional restoration that is dedicated to making these things open source, which I think is the solution for abandonware. Why, if you go out of business, I think it should be a law that if you go out of business and you've sold software or something, that all of it should become open source for them.
Why wouldn't why wouldn't the Food and Drug Administration be covering this?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's a medical device, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like something that falls perfectly within their purview to cover and say exactly what you said. Your software must be open source, or they at least have to have the code on file with the FDA somewhere in a vault, right? So the FDA can make it open source if that company goes out of business.
That's a clever idea. Does the FDA oversee implants?
Medical devices. I mean, if it goes in your body, it must be something that the FDA. That's it. No, not the Food and Drug Administration. The what's the one that covers medical stuff?
I have no idea. HIPAA.
Well, not the CDC, but it's not HIPAA. Gosh, why are we doing this? I sound stupid right now.
Yeah, Google that, will you?
Which agency is responsible for drugs, right?
Yeah.
It is the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration.
Well, that's the drugs, but I mean, I didn't know if they only did consumables or if they oversee
for regulating medical devices. Yeah.
Implants. Yeah, let's see what that is.
All right. The Food and Drug Administration. I was
Regulates
right.
all medical devices.
There you go, Internet. I have it on camera. I was right.
Yeah, nailed it.
There we go. All you assholes out there that constantly say I'm not right about shit.
Yeah.
I have it now right there. I was right.
Verifiable.
All right.
Yeah. John 1, Internet 1,000.
I guessed my shit correctly.
Well, I guess so this institute out of Case Western Reserve University is dedicated to designing open source implants for patients. That's just the move. I don't understand. Yeah.
I think there's another thing that could be said here too. You know, it's abandonware. Obviously, in this context, is incredibly dangerous in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredibly annoying or bad for like research and stuff like that that's held on systems where people can't access it anymore. But there's another term that we might, put into the lexicon and call it hostageware.
Oh yeah, I think ransomware is the.
Well,
one
no, ransomware is a different sort of thing, right? Ransomware is where they infect your computer and they basically encrypt all your stuff and then tell you, to pay to get it unencrypted.
Yep.
No, what I call hostageware is like what's going on with McDonald's. So you may have heard that a lot of McDonald's are constantly their ice cream machines are constantly down.
We talked about that on a
We
separate
did talk
podcast.
about that.
Yeah, you went into it.
And it turns out, right, that the reason that they're down is because they throw a fault for something or other,
some
right?
computer
And
deal.
then they have to wait for a technician to come out and plug into the software and basically clear the fault, right?
Yeah.
So another company went in and they figured out, hey, we can figure out how to clear these faults, right? And so franchise owners started buying the software where they could just plug in and clear the fault and keep their machine running. They don't have to wait for a tech.
Yeah.
The techs are only assigned through McDonald's, through this contract that McDonald's Corporation has with the company that made the software that runs their ice cream machine.
Yeah.
Right? So it ended up where this other third-party company said, we can solve this problem. And now I don't know where the status is on this lawsuit or whatever, but I think they're in a lawsuit whether or not that franchisees are allowed to use this third-party software rather than having to spend so much money and time and lost revenue because of something that's easily cleared.
Yeah, I think speaking of Musk, we were just talking about him, that he does that stuff with Tesla. Like you can't resell the Tesla. You have to have like your
the big one with that. One of the one of the big
nightmare.
reasons why I wouldn't buy a Tesla. So I was, I'm one of the people that people call early adopters,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really fascinated by technology and stuff like that. So one of the things that really interested me is self-driving cars. Well, let's not get into the debate about whether, something should be called full self-driving when it's not close, So just a real quick aside on that. Level 5 is considered full self-driving where the car is autonomous, right? But there are no cars on the road these days that are past level 2.
Yeah.
But yet Musk sells a package called full self-driving, right? Which sounds in plain language like it should be level 5. But anyway, it's a $15,000 upgrade, right? So great. So you pay for it. You've got your full self-driving, which is going to be as close to autonomous as we have these days. And I tested it. It's pretty good. But if you sell the car, you don't sell the license to the license for the software doesn't go with it. Now, where in the world does that make sense? The next person has to buy that again.
We're just on this nonsensical subscription models where like they sell you something and then they nickel and dime you afterwards.
Or how about
you have
this?
to pay to use it.
How about this? Right, with the Tesla stuff. This is another reason why I didn't want to buy the Tesla, right? Not only has Musk been petulant, right, with some people, right, and switched on or off their software, in my opinion, I'm not sure about that, okay? So I want to be clear that I'm probably misremembering that, so it's just my opinion that this may or may not have happened. But I will say something that has happened. So, and this was, kind of a good thing. When there was a hurricane threatening South Florida, Musk went in and everybody who had a Tesla that lived in South Florida, he basically switched on their long-range benefit or feature. He switched on the long-range feature. So basically what it means is that the batteries that people were buying in the Teslas that are coming with the Teslas have the ability to have longer range. But in order to access that longer range, it's a switch in the software that allows them to do that. So I don't know what it costs, $1,000, $2,000, whatever it costs, right?
Yeah.
But for the duration of people trying to evacuate from South Florida, he went in and just with a flip of a switch, he turned everybody's long range on and let them have, the ability to charge up more and
Well,
go further.
It was nice of him to do that, but then it begs the question of why isn't that just automatically the
Exactly.
future? So.
Exactly. You're building things that have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
And you're just deciding not to turn them on unless people pay you more. And that's in my car too. I can't stand it.
Well, speaking of cars, one of the big abandonware cases that are going on right now is with Spotify. Spotify had this car thing. Is that what it's called? Car thing?
Yeah, I want to see that. I'm not sure what's going on with that.
So they sold this little TV thing. I'm not real familiar with it, but when I was on my kind of research mode, I ran across this. I guess it's just like a radio, but for Spotify.
Yeah,
and they're gonna stop. They stopped selling them in 22, and they're no longer supported. So meaning the device is just no longer going to work. So you bought this thing, and now it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, no, I think that's awful. I think Spotify owes every person who bought that a full refund.
I agree. Yeah, you can't sell something and just say it no longer works anymore just because you don't want to mess with it.
Yeah. No, and that happens all the time, stuff like that. I can't imagine all the little devices. Well, I'll tell you this. So Apple devices, after a certain period, they become absolutely useless for almost anything. I've got several of those. My mom gave me an old iPad. She said, here, you can try to use this. No chance. You can't even, it's every piece of software every app you want to try to download, it says not supported. The thing is so slow, it won't even support like basic internet. You would think that they would at least keep it where it would be fast enough for basic internet, right?
I'm of the opinion that on all of those technology things, especially phones, this is my one conspiracy theory I believe in, is that after you've paid off your phone, it stops working as well.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt that they have something like that built in.
Like it slows it down, or the battery only lasts a certain amount of time. But I've always noticed that every time I've paid off my phone, like the next week almost, my phone starts working crappier, and I just hate it.
Yeah,
it makes me angry.
I would not doubt. I would not doubt that there are people in these planning meetings, that are talking about this stuff, and they build that stuff in to some degree. If it's not a direct like let's make this thing, let's plan for this obsolescence, which that's an actual term, planned obsolescence. Mm-hmm. It might be something as simple as purchasing components that will degrade a certain way over time when you could purchase better components.
Yeah.
I had this argument a long time ago with cases, right? So one of the things that I always insisted on when I was working with factories on behalf of other companies trying to help them to build better cases, I insisted on using the best available parts. So we're talking about zippers, zipper pieces, things like that, things that break. And I said, well, let's find the best ones available, right? The ones that are, like military grade, if you will. Because, you don't want to be in the middle of combat, and have the zipper on your backpack break, right? Your rucksack, right?
Fair.
So I'm sure that the military has certain standards. Right?
Yeah.
So I thought there must be something like that. And, sure enough, there are things like that are strong, right? So these guys make a case for me, and I'm going through and I'm testing it, and the zippers are just all breaking real easily, right, without much pressure. So I said to him, I said, hey, I thought that I told you guys I wanted these better zippers, that I had found, these zipper pulls actually. And they said, well, they said to me, those are more expensive, so we decided to go with the other ones, right? And I was like, but that's not what I told you to do, so I didn't tell you to make that decision. If you're going to make that decision, then before you do it, just at least present it to me and let me make the decision, mm-hmm. right? Because I'm working on behalf of another company that doesn't want to have cases flying back at them because zippers are breaking easily.
Yeah.
Well, we went back and forth, and it was getting really contentious, right, for like 2 hours. And finally, I said, well, what's the difference in price? You guys keep talking about cheaper, and you want to make these decisions on my behalf, right?
If it's less than 10 cents, I'm going to lose my mind.
So It was literally less than 50 cents.
Okay, still
Was
that's
the
terrible.
difference in price from the best zippers. And when I talk about the best zippers, I'm talking about taping this thing to a table
Yeah.
and taking a hammer and hitting it as hard as you could
Yeah.
and having to watch out that hammer didn't bounce back and hit you in the face.
Yeah.
And why I tape it is because the first time that I did it, I expected it to break when I hit it with a hammer, so I just put it on the table and I hit it so hard the damn thing squirted out like a bullet.
Yeah, and was fine.
Right? And it was fine, of course, right? So the next times we taped them down and then hammered them, right? And I was like, so you guys are going to put our company in jeopardy. I mean, that was a little hyperbolic, but at least for this product, right, where we're going to have these things coming back within a month or two with zippers breaking. Or if they don't get sent back, then we just get a bad reputation, right?
Right.
And you're going to do all that to me for 50 cents, which, by the way, I'm willing to pay. You know? And so that's what is dealt with all the time. Sometimes it's not just the fact that a company itself is planning the obsolescence, right? Sometimes it's a supplier trying to cheapen things up on their end so they can make a few cents more profit on the product without they're switching out parts.
Well, so they're probably hoping it breaks, so then you'll just be like, I'll just buy a new one.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Well, on the Spotify deal, a lawsuit was filed with the courts in New York following the news, and that they'll stop supporting this device. And it's called the Car Thing. What a great name! But the quote is, as a direct and proximate consequence of Spotify's conduct, people who purchased and own this product now have a useless product.
Yeah, it
And
says right
it's not
there,
fair.
Spotify misleadingly sold them all a $100 paperweight. Is the quote that's on this website.
And it's not that big a deal, but some people probably really like it, and they're pissed off it's not going to be continued anymore.
Well, it is a big deal because these are the kind of things that these companies do to consumers, right? So any given consumer, right, you're going to say, okay, it's not that big of a deal because I don't know what this thing costs. Let's say $100, right? What's $100 to most people? But when you look at it in the aggregate, then it becomes hundreds of millions potentially.
Look at this, too. I missed this part, I think, in my first read. In July of the same year, Spotify announced it was discontinuing the Car Thing and sold off its remaining stock for $50, probably knowing that it was
that they were discontinuing
Yeah,
it.
they were going to discontinue the service. So they probably announced they were discontinuing
No, it says
making
right there, it announced that it was discontinuing the Car Thing and would sell off its remaining stock at a discounted price of $49.99. However, for those subscribers who already had one, it continued to support the device. That support is now ending.
Yeah,
right?
when they sold that stuff off on cheap, they knew they were going to stop it eventually.
So basically, they were saying, pay us $50 and we'll just run this until we decide not to.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing that the people who bought those after that announcement was made are not really going to be entitled to anything in this lawsuit. Because Spotify will argue, well, they knew it was going to end, right? But the other people that bought it before that, I think they have a case.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think the people who bought the $50 one knew it was going to end. When they say discontinue the thing, they just mean discontinue that they were going to make it, not that you were going to not be able to use it anymore.
Oh, they were discontinuing the item itself,
Yeah.
not that they were discontinuing support.
Yeah.
Oh, then you're right.
Yeah,
They probably
and
do
then
have
they
it. Yeah.
decided they were going to discontinue
Yeah.
the support later on.
Yeah.
So I guess what they're doing is a forced
yeah.
firmware update, which will result in the device becoming obsolete.
Leaving affected consumers with a paperweight that costs between $50 and $100.
You know, if you are a savvy computer guy, and this is actually happening, if you had another use for that device that you could implement, that's a small business right there. I wonder how many of those things they actually sold.
Well, that would be another thing where like the Federal Trade Commission should come in and force Spotify to open source the software.
Yeah.
And let the public figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, somebody savvy could come up with something that'll work well for it. And at least people could use it till it breaks or something, Or maybe they could just get the regular radio.
The goal of our
even.
Car Thing exploration in the U.S. was to learn more about how people listen in their car. So basically, pay us so we can experiment on you.
Yeah, that's what it is. For sure, they were losing money on it. They didn't sell enough. The support and the business of it just couldn't
Jesus,
continue.
I mean,
Or they were losing money. But
I mean,
still,
there has to be a version of the software that just works, right? I mean, there has to be a most basic way to get to Spotify.
well, and people still have it on their phone. There's no reason like
Yeah.
their phone couldn't connect, or they could come up with some BS reason. Now, it might not make it worth having, but just completely discontinuing, they're for sure getting the lawsuits for sure going through. I wonder
Presumably, when responding to the lawsuit, Spotify will instead argue that the car thing sold for $90 plus taxes and shipping, which isn't that expensive. And worst case scenario, purchasers got more than 2 years use out of it. Or maybe it'll just point to some tedious terms and conditions from when the devices were sold. That I believe. I believe that there's probably something in their terms and conditions where Spotify says, we reserve the right to discontinue supporting this thing at any time.
100%.
Suck it up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, in that long form that nobody ever reads.
Yeah. Crazy.
There is one guy that reads them. You know what? That would probably be another job. I wonder if there's a website out there of some guy who just reads every terms and conditions and knocks the highlights out for you.
I have heard
Yeah.
that there is someone who does that, who
Yeah.
basically turns terms and conditions into plain language.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
That's another good website or a business.
So this has also resulted in legal action, the outcome of which will be much more significant than this car thing customer spat. Though it will be interesting to see whether the car thing lawsuit does indeed result in any damages for those Americans who, as of December, will be driving around with a $100 paperweight in their vehicle. Is there more?
No, that's the end.
Oh, that's it. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's time. This is the importance of departments like the Federal Trade Commission, things like that, and whatever their equivalents are in Europe and other places. That's where consumer protection comes in, because otherwise these corporations, they do shit like this all the time.
Yeah.
And then they indemnify themselves in their, deep in their terms of services. It's like we talked about before with the Disney one, where they're trying to tell somebody that if someone dies at a park, that they're into forced arbitration.
Yeah, because of the Disney Plus nonsense. Yeah.
And they do this stuff all the time where, the Abandonware is a perfect example of this, where you just stick somebody, the $150,000 for the software to run a microscope, right?
Well, I think it was for the microscope and software, but you can't run it without one or the other.
Right. That's ridiculous, So I agree with you on that they should be forced to open source it, or at least give it to the FTC so that they can, open source it if the company, stops supporting it, and let the public hackers take over and figure it out.
And that kind of comes to our topic that we talked about a few weeks ago, that right to repair. I'm a big believer that all of this stuff, if you buy something, you should have the schematics and the software and everything that you need to run it yourself.
Yeah,
I mean, granted, I'm not going to do anything with it.
Yeah, to a degree, because sometimes there's proprietary stuff. Sometimes there's patented stuff in there, that you don't want people to necessarily make it easy for them to reverse engineer it.
I mean, I guess.
But if it's something like being able to take a module, you buy a used Tesla or something like that, and all it really needs is a module, and Tesla says, well, you're not the original owner of this thing, right? You bought it at a junkyard somewhere. It was registered to Jack Black or whatever, and you're not Jack Black, so we're not sending you a module. Fuck that. That's evil. So
yeah, I guess I just don't know where you draw the line. I'm a big fan, and maybe this is your liberal views rubbing off on me, but maybe you just need to open source everything. Just allow access to all of it. I mean, I know you get proprietary nonsense, and you don't want people copying you and stuff like that, but just continue to make a better product.
I mean, that's easier said than done sometimes, because if you've spent a lot of money in the R&D phase for something, sometimes you really have poured a lot into it, and once you've got something working, if you give everyone access to it, then basically you've also given away all of the R&D that you put into it.
Yeah, I guess that's fair enough.
So there has to be a balance there, and
Okay.
that's a reason.
Fine line.
Well, that's a reason why patents expire in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that after 10 years, the inventor is presumed to have gotten their commercial, benefit out of it, and then everybody can access it. Okay. Or at least they can access, they can use the information in the patent and reverse engineer it and not have to pay royalties.
Fair point.
So maybe after 10 years at least, everything about it should be released to the public. I don't know.
Yeah, but with technology, things change so quickly. It would maybe need to be a shorter time frame. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not the one to solve that world's problem, but I'm just
Well,
angry
I
about
think with
it.
that we can
You know?
move into that was your very angry.
I know.
That looks so angry, right? I don't think you'd get on AOC's list of preferred protesters with that one. You need more energy.
Yeah, I'm not that angry about it.
This episode is sponsored by JB Cases. JB Cases is a pool cue case company specializing in custom cases. They have been in business since 2007, and their motto is true protection, true durability, true comfort, and true custom. Visit them at jbcases.com. So that's going to segue though into our next segment here, which is time wasting. You know, how companies waste your time.
Yep.
Well, you know, part of it would be wasting your time trying to get them to do the right thing to let you repair your stuff. You know, because
Yeah.
a lot of these companies, you call them up. You know, you're trying to solve a problem. They don't really care how long that they keep you sitting on the phone or whatever. And I believe that a lot of them prefer to just keep you, you know, kind of going from department to department or pushing buttons or, you know, until you give up and you're just like, you know, screw it. I'll deal with it another day. And then another day never comes because now you've paid another month of the subscription or whatever it is you're trying to cancel or get rectified.
Yeah. Well, my kind of story on time wasting and my tip for all small business owners: do not lose your employee identification number that you get from the IRS. So when you start a business, you usually you can do it online, but you can also submit a form SS4, and you get an employee identification number, sometimes called a federal employee identification number or an EIN. It is basically the Social Security for your business, and you get it on one little form from the IRS.
You get one piece of paper.
You get your piece of paper. It's got your number on it, and that's it. There's nowhere else you can look it up online. Now, if you've been in business for a while, it's on all your tax forms and payroll
That's
reports.
crazy,
and stuff.
though, that you can't even go to the government and look it up.
So you can't look it up online. The only way to find your federal ID number if you lose it is to call them, and you wait on hold. And it usually takes, the fastest I've heard somebody do it is 4 hours. The longest, one of my clients said, I have called every day for 2 weeks and I can't give them the right information. I gave them a wrong address or the wrong zip code or something. They had to call back 4 times and they finally got it.
That is the craziest thing I've ever heard, that you can't even like have a login with the government.
Yep, they don't have it. They don't have it available where you can just look it up online. So when I start businesses for people, and I can get federal IDs for people as a third party if they give me the permission and everything, I save it to my computer. I print it, a physical copy that we store in our files, and I email it to the client so that it's in 3 different spots for sure that I can find it if I ever need it. But it is a very common tale where new clients will come in and they'll be like, hey, I started this business. I need to file my taxes. And I go, it's my first year. And I go, all right, what's your federal ID? And they go, I got one, or this other lawyer got one for me, but I have no idea.
So what I'll usually do is I'll take a picture of that and I'll put it in my Google Docs under my resources, and I will title it as to what it is.
Yeah. A lot of different ways. Just don't lose it.
And that way I can just type it in and get it. I can get that from anywhere. But another thing that I do is I put it in my phone contacts. So I showed you the other day, I have in my phone contacts JB Cases. I've got my EIN. And then you immediately shot back, okay, fine, what's your Magic Room one? And I was like, I'll call you.
Well, businesses, and I'm sure you've got stories, are great at wasting your time, especially if you're trying to get a refund or you're trying to cancel something. They can waste your time. But the government agencies are masters in wasting your time. They will absolutely wreck you. So make sure you save all your documents, and when you call them, have everything that you need in front of you ready to go.
Wasn't it you that was telling me a story about how much time you had to spend? Like somebody had their identity stolen and taxes filed, and they got like a earned income tax.
So
tell that story.
Stealing Social Security numbers is a big thing. There was recently an article where like 100 million, or that's probably
but that's not the one. It was
100 million Social Security numbers got stolen. So With Social Security numbers, it is very common for people to file tax returns. There's a whole industry of criminals that file false tax returns, and they'll say, they're great at filling them out because they'll know how to maximize what's called the earned income credit. So for people who don't make very much money and they have children, they can usually get a very large refund from the government. And so these fraudsters will file a tax return. We had a young lady come into our office. It was her very first year filing a tax return. She was 20, just getting off her parents as a dependent. She made a little bit of money, enough to finally warrant filing a tax return. So they went on to TurboTax and they tried to file a tax return and it got rejected. And they were like, you can't, somebody's already filed for you. Somebody's already filed under your Social Security number. So they come to our office, we get a power of attorney and we call the IRS. Well, it turns out somebody had fraudulently done it. We spent 6 weeks arguing with the IRS that a 20-year-old does not have a 12-year-old child. So it's impossible for them to have the earned income credit. Their date of birth of the children are on the return, but sometimes your date of birth, depending on how you file, is not included. We had to convince forever. We had to send them IDs. We had to send them all this information. Like, this person is 20 years old. The child listed is 12. It's impossible. This is a fraudulent return.
All that time wasted on a tax return for a 20-year-old because somebody at the IRS couldn't just apply common sense and basic math.
Yeah, you can't. The IRS will be like, well, the tax return's filed. And I go, but can you just think about it for a second here? A 20-year-old does not have a 12-year-old son. And they're like, it's filed. And you just hit these brick walls with them. And it, certainly they know there's something wrong, like if they just thought about it for a second, but they get into this bureaucratic mess of, you got to talk to this person and this person and this person. So a business will waste your time, but the government, they're black belts in it.
I have never felt so apprehensive as when I went down to the IRS office here in Oklahoma City, just being in there, right, and in the IRS, and I'm like, I if I say or do anything wrong or I didn't bring the right piece of paperwork, this is going to be another couple hours. As a matter of fact, they sent me out to go get the right type of money order, back, and they wouldn't take cash.
Yep.
That trips me out, The government will not take cash.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yep. Yeah, you have to have a money order.
I have to take the cash that I have in my hand, and I have to go to the post office, that's the only one they'll accept. You can't get a money order from 7-Eleven.
Yep.
Go to the post office, pay the post office for the money order.
Yep.
Come back with the money order and give it to the government.
Yeah, I feel like they just want their extra $1 fee or whatever.
Yeah, whatever, but it's also the waste of time, right? That I had to go because I'm down there.
Yeah.
They should put a big-ass sign right there that says, if you intend on paying in cash, turn around and go buy a money order at the post office.
No, they want you to get in there.
Instead, I have to get a ticket. I have to wait. I have to get all the way up to the counter. I have to do my thing. And they're like, oh, yeah, we don't take cash. You got to go,
Yep.
So
yeah, that's why I have.
Yeah, you're right. They are black belts in.
That's why I have Tiffany working for me. Her job is just to be on phone all day with the IRS. It's a terrible job. She calls in sick sometimes. She doesn't want to.
And my job is to have you have someone call the IRS on my behalf.
I can't. I don't have enough time. Sometimes if I have to call the IRS, I usually just call them and put them. I'm on hold for 2 hours, so I just call in the morning and then do all my morning routine and get everything done, and then by the time I'm ready, maybe somebody answered, or maybe I got another hour.
You know what would be a good idea, I think, to have in that case? To have like a big red light alert, right?
Oh yeah.
So when you're on hold with someone, whether it's on your mobile phone or regular phone or whatever, when a person finally comes on, right, and the very moment they say something, the red light blinks and tells you that they're there, so you can get it before they hang up.
You got to be quick though with the IRS. They'll say, "Hello, are you there?" Hang up.
Wow.
That's it.
Then you need an automated response.
Yeah.
So now we need the AI. You need to program an AI to be your voice.
Okay.
And your voice says, and when they say, "Hello, are you there?" you say, yes, I am.
All right.
Right? And then you make small talk with them in some way that forces them to not be able to hang up for at least a minute or so until you can get to the phone.
Yeah. You know who's a a real master of the time waster. You ever see that guy who wastes the scammers' times?
Oh, I
On
love
the
those.
phone? Man, do I love those videos too.
I love those so much.
That guy's great. There's a few of them that do it, but man.
And some of these dudes have even went to India at this point, to track down some of these.
Oh, really?
They've shut some of them down.
That's awesome.
I love the one where they're wasting the guy's time, but at the same time, while they're wasting his time, they're actually hacking into their computers, and so they get all their data. They hack into their cameras, so they can see everything that's going on, right? And they're just messing with them, right? And then at some point, they'll start letting them know that they know who they are, and then it freaks them the fuck out. Oh, they freak out, man. They're like ants, man, scurrying around, Sometimes you'll see a whole office empty out.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for this week?
I do not have any. I think that feeling real comfortable. I'm glad that we're into phase 2.
All right. Yeah, we're moving right along. So.
And so,
as always, find more info on turtlesmith.com. And that's it, man. We'll see you next week.
You guys have a good one.